video, I shall be discussing the Gestapo and the German resistance, or at least I've got one particular person that I've decided I'm going to talk about. Now, I've done various videos related to the Gestapo and the Gestapo in various places. Above all, for example, I could say I talked about the Great Escape and these people who were tracked down by the Gestapo. Indeed, I do in time want to do something on the Gestapo in Görlitz, where the Great Escapers ended up, although I have so far been a bit frustrated on the research on that one. I have talked about the Gestapo in Kiel or in Munich, both places where Great Escapers did end up and where they were murdered by the local Gestapo. I've talked about the Gestapo again under different circumstances in Munich, about the White Rose, and indeed a number of things. Oscar Schaefer, who was the boss there. And today I'm going to talk about Berlin, I think. And there was another person I really do need to mention, of course, Herbert Lange, who was the first commandant at the Hemel ad Nerum death camp. He was involved in investigating resistance groups, one of which involved a British woman, Christabel Bielenberg, who, because she was married to a gentleman, she actually lived in Germany throughout the Second World War. So anyway, but there's just one or two there. So you've got Hans here, who's in Sweden. So Hans is now in for a bit of a laugh because I'm going to have to try and pronounce some Swedish words in this presentation, and I can't speak Swedish, so that ought to be good for a laugh for anybody who can. Now, the Gestapo is something which a lot of people, I think, have got a false idea about. When I was in Poland during communist times, and when there was the riots which happened on the 31st or the 13th of the month, the people who were demonstrating would shout at the ZOMO, the paramilitary police, that they were Gestapo, and that was a bit unfair, really. They were more like the SA. Rather than anything else, rather than Gestapo, but shouting SA doesn't quite sound right. The Gestapo has got this idea that it's some kind of all-pervading, invigilating organization, and it's everywhere. That just isn't true. I mean, if you look at the amount of Gestapo agents, as a fraction of what the Stasi had, and the Stasi, which had to control a much smaller population. There's only about 17 million people living in East Germany, whereas the population that was under Nazi German occupation is, what, 15 times bigger, something like that? Or maybe I exaggerated a little bit just on the top of my head. Yeah, no, something like getting on for that anyway. And anyway, so the Gestapo wasn't a big organization as such. It was an organization that used spies within it and people who would actually work for it. So whoever was the local head of the Gestapo, he would have been in the telephone directory. So if you wanted to ring him up, you could actually do that. You'd also probably have the other telephone numbers to other people. You could ring up the main office. You could ring up the the transport section and things like that. You could do that if you so wanted to. But that, if you had any dreams of becoming a Gestapo agent, that probably wouldn't be the way you'd do it. Now, Putin, when he joined the FSB or the KGB, he went up to the door in the St. Petersburg equivalent of the Lubyanka, knocked on it and said he wanted to join up. Now, that was highly unusual. That's normally not how it happened in the KGB, and the Gestapo worked on the same principle. I'm sure the Stasi also worked on the same principle as well. This was they would actually locate people and try and bring them into it. Now, why would somebody want to do that? Well, the first thing is that the terror apparatus of the Nazi state. Now, I've just said that there wasn't many people in the Gestapo. There wasn't. But the thing was that all the other organizations within it which created this terror, and it was the terror itself then which made people think, oh, maybe we ought to actually cooperate with it. That would be a better idea than not actually doing so. Now, the idea of having a state secret police was because the goes back to the middle of the 19th century. In 1848, there were revolutions across Europe, and the Prussian secret police actually dates to that. Now, the German Revolution, as such as 1848, was quite liberal. I have this theory that the 1848 revolutions were caused by a disease which came from the region of Lake Titicaca, the Peru and Bolivia, and this was the potato blight, which caused so much damage in Ireland, but it also killed around 100,000 people on the continent of Europe. I think the two things are related, but that's coming off the point completely now. So, but one of the results of this 1848 thing was there was a Prussian political police was created. And so when Bismarck had his wars or his campaigns, his culture camp, so they'd be spying on the Catholic Church, or they'd be spying on socialists above all, and later above all they were interested in spying on communists. And in the Weimar Republic they were also trying to infiltrate the extreme nationalists. So, and today I think there's still a political police in Germany. I think they're more interested in the extreme right rather than the extreme left. The danger of the extreme left has now largely gone, but the extreme right is here, whereas 40 years ago the danger was from the extreme left and not so much the extreme right. Anyway, that apart. So the Gestapo itself came about from this Prussian secret police. So on the day that Hitler was appointed Chancellor, he had Hermann Goering appointed the police minister. In fact, he was the deputy policeman for Prussia under von Papen. But because he got the police in his hands, he was then able to create in the largest state of Germany this secret organization. He put a person called Rudolf Diels in command of it, and eventually, Goering was later in charge, and eventually it was Himmler. But the setup, though, the recruiting and the objectives sort of remained the same. So at being political, it represent not only trying to spy on political parties, but also those people or organizations that it was opposed to. So I've talked about people who escaped, the Great Escape as well. Okay, that's quite obvious why the Gestapo, as a police organization, amongst many others, more than 40 organizations which were looking for them. But for people, they did things like, for example, they try and infiltrate where homosexuals used to hang out, gay bars, or as such as they existed. You may think they should have had better things to do with the time than that, but that produced results, and I'm sure that they were results driven. They were interested in finding out where Jewish people were hiding, or wherever they may be. So this became a thing that the Gestapo did. But their main role had to be one of doing political stuff. Now, in Nazi Germany, there were lots of people who were disenchanted with the regime. Now, for example, with Herbert Langer, the commandant of Belzec, he tried to infiltrate groups. Now, these groups could be just people who got together and they talked about something like art or I don't know, music or whatever it was, listen to a few records or whatever it was. But in time, these people would start talking about politics, or alternatively, it could be, for example, former socialist groups, communists, or whatever, trade unionists, who would meet and say, well, what can we do about our situation in general? So they would form cells, and the idea of a cell was just to sort of spring into life when the glorious day actually came about. Same as sort of the way that communists always believe there's going to be this wonderful glorious day, so they form the cells now, they sort of sleeper cells, and then they all come out into the street when the revolution actually starts. Now, the Gestapo wanted to infiltrate, first of all, these things, so they looked for volunteers, they worked off denunciations. Denunciations came from people who either they supported the regime, or it could be that they just didn't like the people they were denouncing. It could be that, okay, I can't stand that neighbour, I'll denounce him, or I owe some money to the butchers, so I think I'll denounce him. Way of getting rid of people which weren't useful to them. That thing about actually owing money, there was quite a lot of that, which happened particularly in the occupied territories, where those to whom credit were the lenders were often denounced by people so that the money didn't have to be paid back. Now, many of the victims of denunciations then could face death sentences, and there were many thousands of them given to people who were opposed to the National Socialist regime. As I said the other day, the death sentences need to be clearly defined. There were these mass murders which were secret in theory. It had an RS security, which is top secret in Nazi parlance. But the other executions of political opponents, that was absolutely clear. There were big posters put up, red and black letters, to make it clear that this person had been executed and for these reasons. And that would be done via either A, in the case of political people, that could be the show trials where they were already deemed guilty beforehand, or alternatively, it could be because they actually committed a crime, like the character I spoke about, I think was it Saturday or something like that, who was a criminal, and he killed somebody, and then posters were put up to show that he had been executed. There is a very interesting case which I'm going to refer to. I've already done a video on it, but I'm going to sort of refer to anyway. Dagmar Imgart, a female, a woman from Sweden, and she chose to be a Gestapo agent. I mean, she denied it after the war, but I think it's pretty clear that she did so. And I think to a certain extent there was something in her that she did it because she found it somewhat exciting. But anyway, I'll tell you the story, and then afterwards you can go and watch the video if you want. So Dagmar Imgart, she was born Dagmar Eteling, yes, on the 8th of June 1896 in Ramsbury, in the municipality of Lindesberg, in the central Swedish province of Örebro. And her parents were farmers. In 1922, she went to Germany. Lots of people go off to Germany in their 20s. I was a bit younger, I went off to France, and to learn the language, she went off to Germany. And while she was there, she met Dr. Otto Imgart. They married on the 28th of October 1922, and ended up having a daughter together who was called Birgitta. Now, Otto Imgart was a member of an organization called Vingolf, which I think is still around, and that was an umbrella organization of several Christian student fraternities. And this led him to become getting a job, which was an honorary job, an honorary role as a federal statistician, and in turn he became a federal archivist. And this was good because he was sort of an amateur historian. Sort of people like me, I like to go into archives. Even if I don't know what I'm looking for, I like to go into archives. I find it very exciting. It might sound exciting to everybody, but if you're watching this, you probably think it's quite a good thing to do. And this allowed, because he was in the archives, he got contact with lots of people in academic areas. Now, this in turn, because he had these contacts within academic circles, he then is able to develop contacts when Hitler came to power of people who were likely to be in opposition to the Nazis. And what he had as an advantage was his wife, because his wife was Swedish and she could travel between, she got to Stettin as it was then, and then go to Sweden as and when she wanted. And she didn't need a permit. A German person needed to go through all sorts of paperwork to get permission to leave, to get the passport, and also to get foreign currency, which wasn't at all easy for her. But this brought her to the attention of the Gestapo, particularly after the war started, when it was almost impossible for people to leave Germany. So by 1941, though it would seem that she was working for the Gestapo. Why she did it, I don't know, but they allowed her to do it. And the fact that she could actually go there and backwards showed that it allowed her to make money out of it. So she could bring stuff back from there, sell it on the black market, and no doubt it was quite profitable business. She was given the code name Babs, which sounds like a 1960s British comedy, and Agent V140. And her job was to spy on church organizations which were opposed to the National Socialist system. Now, there was this thing called the German Christians, and that was it was founded in 1932 in Altenburg near Leipzig, and that, whereas it was independent of the Nazis, it had many of the very similar aims that the Nazis had, and it had it got rid of the Old Testament, and instead it replaced it with the New Testament. Any mention of Jews had to be written in a bad light, and anything about Jesus he became some Aryan Christian sort of person. And anyway, so in her case, her handlers requested that she became a member of something called the Una Sancta movement. And then she tried to move in circles of somebody whom was called Alfred Kaufmann. Kaufmann had been a supporter of the DNVP, and they were Hitler's coalition partners. So he was quite far right. And it was thanks to the DNVP and their role in 1933, which effectively brought Hitler to power. And I think Kaufmann himself had been the priest or the pastor who had to the parents of Rudolf Hess. And so you'd think that people in that position, he would have been quite pro Hitler, but let's not forget that Hess had cleared off under extremely suspicious circumstances in May 1941. As far as the Nazis were concerned, Hitler had the two adjutants who told him about that Hess had gone. They were both arrested, and so therefore Kaufmann himself became a person of suspicion, even more so as it turned out that he'd gone off the idea of right-wing politics after Hitler had come to power. So he'd worked for this, and when Hitler did come to power, he thought that this was really bad. He refused to give the Hitler salute. He refused to say the Hitler greeting, or the German greeting as they called it, the Heil Hitler, when they met each other. And he actually formed a social circle, one of these literary circles where people would meet and talk about what was going on. Now, this wasn't a resistance group, but the Gestapo didn't know that. And in part, though, they did do things which were illegal. For example, they were listening to foreign radio broadcasts, and that in fact, indeed, could even carry the death penalty, listening to foreign radio broadcasts. And they then discussed the news amongst themselves. So I suspect that the Gestapo thought that Kaufmann was in contact with Hess. I don't know how we would do that, because Hess was imprisoned in the United Kingdom by this time. But anyway, there was a show trial on the 21st of July 1942. Kaufmann was sentenced to death by the People's Court alongside somebody called Heinrich Will. And so this was the first case of somebody being sentenced to death for listening to foreign radio broadcasts. Elizabeth Will, who was the wife of Heinrich Will, was also she was sentenced to prison, but instead of staying very long in prison, she was sent to Auschwitz and she was murdered there. And there was another member of this group who ended up in the hands of the Darmstadt Gestapo, and that person was beaten to death. Heinrich Will was executed by guillotine in Frankfurt on the 19th February 1943. And there was posters, the ones I mentioned earlier, put up around Gießen and the surrounding area, telling people, that this had happened. But not only that, on the 21st of February, a day off school was given to people, school kids, and that was done as a sort of an act of revenge by the regime. Rather odd in the circumstances, given that Stalingrad had happened only less than 3 weeks previously, and the country then had 3 days of mourning. Now, Kaufman got a number of requests for clemency, and perhaps due to his past services, his sentence was commuted, and he was put into prison in Butzbach, and he remained there until he was liberated by American troops. And although the conditions they found him were pretty bad, he then at the end he moved to Heilbronn, where I sort of half live, and he died there in 1946 at the age of 78. Now, at the time that this group had been arrested, Imgart had been arrested too. And the point of that, of course, was to make it look as though she wasn't the person who given the information to. Now, and then the reason she was released officially was because that she had no information of any use, and she was clearly not guilty. And now, this, however, she could still keep traveling. And the rather strange thing was that a priest in Berlin asked her if she could deliver a letter to the Archbishop of Uppsala, and she agreed, but she didn't take the letter to Sweden with her, but she gave it to her Gestapo handlers. Now, the priest was Father Max Metzger, and he had written in this letter 1 or 2 ideas he sort of jotted down relating to a new democratic free Germany following liberation. Now, Metzger obviously was arrested 29th of June 1943, was sentenced to death on the 14th of October 1943 and executed on 17th of April 1944 in Brandenburg. Now, in August 1944, the husband, Otto Imgart, was recruited into being a guard at Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. So this would have been he didn't choose it. I mean, this did happen from time to time, that people were forced to be concentration camp guards, and he was given the rank of Unterscharführer, so he's like corporal. And nonetheless, his wife was still free. In January 1945, she went to Sweden with her daughter. I don't know if that was to get her out of harm's way, or if she was on a Gestapo mission. I mean, she could well have been on a Gestapo mission, but given that this time, Himmler was no doubt looking for anyone who had any contacts anywhere that could be of use to him. And of course, she was well down the pecking order, but somebody might have passed out, hey, I've got this Swedish woman here, and maybe she could be of some use to us. And anyway, Bergen-Belsen, there was typhus. There was typhus just about everywhere in camps like that. I mean, typhus is produced by when the body loses its resistance. You've got starvation, and you've got people cramped, many people in a small area. And now it's obviously it would affect the inmates first, but it would also affect the guards. And there's plenty of evidence of this actually attacking guards as well. And one of the guards who actually got it was her husband, and he died on the 25th of April 1945. So that was after liberation. Now, the Swedes got wind of what Dagmar Imgart had been doing for the Third Reich, and she was arrested, questioned, but then she was kicked out of Sweden after the Second World War on the 13th of September 1946. Now, you can imagine she'd been in a pretty bad state, and she was pretty upset about it. She must have been realized that people potentially would have been after her. I mean, the people she'd betrayed had been from Christian groups, but they may have had 1 or 2 people within them which could have resorted to violence, and so she would probably have had to keep her head down. She was arrested at a psychiatric hospital in Hamburg, and she was put on trial in Gießen in 1947. She got 10 years imprisonment on the 18th of August 1947. She went to prison in Darmstadt, same Gestapo she'd early been working for, but she was released when an appeal was made. And on the 31st of October 1949 in Gießen, they refused to open another trial against her. So a new trial was actually set in Limburg, and she was acquitted in that case on 31st of October 1951. And she had continued to have legal woes. This was overturned on appeal 20th of January 1953 by the Federal Court of Justice, which then sent it to the Kassel Regional Court for a new hearing. This court asked for a 15-month sentence for her for betting and deprivation of liberty of other people, and this appeal was rejected by the Federal Court of Justice 20th of June 1956-57. Dagmar Imgart began a sentence in Frankfurt, but she was out after a few months because of all the time she'd spent in pre-trial detention. And on the 14th of June 1957, she was released on probation, and she didn't serve anything else. Now, she then went to a place called Zwingenberg, which is south of Darmstadt, and she moved around, and died on the 30th of August 1980, the age of 88. And she claimed that she'd never betrayed anyone to the Gestapo, but it was quite obvious that she had been a Gestapo agent, and she had done this. In the video I did on Christopher Blankenberg, the name of the agent who actually betrayed them did become known. It is there was a German documentary that was made, I think, around in the mid-80s, or maybe it was the end of the 80s, where they got a hold of some of the Gestapo files, and they had found on them the people that actually done the denunciations. In Berlin, where the Gestapo headquarters, Prince Albrechtstraße, today it's called a topography of terror. And the former Gestapo buildings, you can only really see the basements, or where they were. It's got a fantastic exhibition there. It's one of the best. When I was there 2 years ago, and anyway, so I met one of the people there in charge, and he took me down to their sort of archive. No, it's not really an archive; it's more of a reading room than anything else. He said to me, "Well, how long will you need?" And I said to him, "For the rest of my life." Anyway, good. So that's I think what I've said today for the day. I hope Hans found my Swedish pronunciation adequate. I'll now come on to the questions. I hope that was okay as well. And anyway, so let's have a look at some of the questions if there are any. Hello, Mike, Craig, Hans, Elma's mum, oh, sorry, that's it. So no questions. Yes, so Elma's mum does request that you hit the thumbs up. It doesn't cost anything, and it does help me. Yes, it would help me. Actually, I must admit, there was a video I did on the German resistance on the pastor Ulrich Sporleder. I was rather upset it didn't get many views. I only got less than 400, and I thought, the amount of time I'd spent on doing it about 8 days and doing nothing else, and so I was. But anyway, if I got more, that would be great. I noticed that I did a video on somebody called Horst Fischer about 2 years ago. Horst Fischer was a doctor who was executed in East Germany in 1965. He'd been in Auschwitz, and anyway, somebody else put one up, and I watched about 3 minutes. It was historically utter nonsense. And I thought, that video there, it's got about 15 times more views than mine did. Why? At least I'm actually doing some research on mine. Anyway, never mind. Okay, Hans, thanks very much for Swedish. I have absolutely zero intention of learning any Swedish, even if I lived there. Apart from that, I've got now to a stage in my life where I just can't learn new languages. So that's it for me as far as languages are concerned. In fact, my biggest problem now is actually not forgetting those that I already know. I forget things quite a lot. In fact, I can look something up and then I've forgotten it again within a few minutes. Oh, thanks, Elma's mum. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. So anyway, good. In the in the comment section, I will leave links to other Gestapo videos, and I'll do this with all of the things that I do from now on related to talks when I do just sort of do something like this. For the moment, I can actually do this because I do have it's not so difficult for me. When I'm on the road, I'm living in my motorhome, it is more difficult because you just don't know how good the internet connection is going to be in many cases. And apart from that, I know it's here in the UK it's only 7:30 now, but I'm just about to go to bed. I go to bed very early. I got up today at 10 to 3, so I sort of work in the morning and then I do other things. Then I do this last thing of all. So thanks for being here, and bye for now. All the best. Bye.